Hello, my name is Stephen Schaub, and I'm the leader of the FIGITAL Revolution 2.0 here on YouTube. And today I thought I would take you with me on a photo shoot. I have to go to Burlington to pick up my wife. She's flying back in. And I said, you know what? Why don't I take a few hours beforehand and do a little bit of shooting with my Widelux F7 and a little bit of Tri-X and, see what we get. So I'm hoping today to talk to you a little about the way that I approach a shot, talk to you about considerations of metering, thoughts on composition, and we'll make this just a real fun sort of, hopefully multi-shot examples. And then I'll process the film tomorrow and we will take a look at the final results. So let's get going. Hello, so now we are at beautiful Shelburne Farms in Shelburne, Vermont. It's an unbelievable place. You'll see more of it in a few minutes. The breeding barn is over here, but I love this beautiful home here on the hill. The architecture is just beautiful. The composition, the shadow and highlights, it has everything that I'm looking for in a test learning exposure that we're going to do today. So using the viewfinder app on my phone, I've determined that somewhere right up in here, just a few feet away, is where I want to stand so I get the proper angle of view. It's got beautiful leading lines, lots of nice play of light. Also then using the handy pocket exposure card, I had two thoughts on this. My first thought is F11 ISO 400 speed film, F11 at a 1/25th. That would ensure plenty of shadow detail in the dark trees here. And with the developer that I'm going to use, I won't blow out the highlight. That's sort of a traditional way of metering this scene. However, for those of you that watched alternative thoughts on metering, William Mortensen would say, actually, don't worry about the shadows. Look at the high tones on the house. Look at the reflection of light on that yellow siding there. What exposure do I need for doing that? And that would be more like F11 at a 2/50th. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one exposure at each of those two settings, and then we'll determine which one we like the best. So let's get at the photograph here. All right, so that takes care of the two shots that I wanted to do here. Let's load up and we'll move on to another place. And I thought I would just take 1 second and show you this unbelievable barn. This was the breeding barn. It's a solid copper roof. And when it was made, this was the largest continuous wooden structure in the United States. It's enormous, but unfortunately it's closed on the inside today. So we'll have to go find another place to shoot here. All right, so here we are now at another location on beautiful Shelburne Farms. And I love the isolated quality of this tree on this hillside. And because I'm working with the Widelux, and because it has such a big field of view, angle of view, it's gonna just feel amazing. Another thing too, because the Widelux is a panning lens, because the lens goes from side to side, if I tip the camera down or tip the camera up, I can change a bowing or an expansion of the horizon line. So in a piece like this, if I do like a really strong symmetry where I try to keep this main tree center framed, I can have it sort of fitting within a valley or sort of coming out of a hill. It's kind of nice to have that option. The light hasn't changed a lot since the last shot. I'm still gonna say it's probably F11 at a 1/25th, or this one here is probably more a 2/50th, primarily because there's just more open light here than there was on the last shot. So I'm gonna get into taking the shot. And once again, just like on the last shot, I'm gonna take two here as well. One sort of what I think a traditional metering exposure would be for here. The second one for, what sort of a Mortensen's approach would be. Additionally too, there is one complexity. The sun is right here. And because this lens is gonna pan, there's a chance that I'm gonna get some flare. The good part is, I love flare. All right, so that's two shots now that we've taken. The first location, now this location. I'm gonna walk over here and show you the beautiful farm barn. If you're ever in Vermont, I absolutely recommend coming to Shelburne Farms. It's beautiful, you can walk everywhere, and the architecture and the landscape is really second to none. So the beautiful barn that you're seeing there that looks kind of like a European castle, that's the farm barn. Absolutely stunning, amazing to shoot. Maybe sometime I'll come back with the 4x5 and we will do a video of architectural photography using this place because it's really perfect for that. Name?
Jacques-Paul Martin.
Yep. And you've here at Shelburne Farms for how long?
I've been affiliated with the farm for over 15 years.
Absolutely awesome. Thank you for posing for the photo today.
Oh, thank you so much for stopping by. Appreciate it.
All right, so we just had a really exciting impromptu portrait that I did of Jacques, which I will post a little bit of video about him. We'll see how it turns out. He's up here using a scythe cutting down the grass on the side of the field. Really amazing. So here's another shot that I'm looking at. Now, if you look at through the camera here, it's this interesting intersection of 4 lines out in the field. But with the video camera you're seeing here, it's kind of boring. I mean, you've got a long leading line, you've got an intersection, but once again, because I can bow the horizon line because of the curved film plane, I'm going to play off of that and expand that sort of bow so it becomes more dramatic. Once again, exposure at this point is still f11 at either a 1/25th or a 2/50th. We're going to do both, once again, comparing those two exposures. I want to be, you can't see me, I want to be just a little off center in this too when I shoot it. I'm not going for like Wes Anderson direct on, but I also don't want to be too far off. So here, I'll turn the camera a little bit so you can see me while I'm shooting. I think that'll work. I'm just out of frame, but that's fine. I don't really want the foreground line here. I really want it to start once you get past that. The sun is right up above me, so that's potentially an issue with flare. We'll just have to wing it. All right, so we have that exposure. Now what we're gonna do, I'm not even gonna move anywhere. You're gonna walk with me. We're gonna come across the trail here. There's some beautiful brown Swiss cows. So here at Shelburne Farm, they make like some of the absolute coolest cheese I think you can get anywhere. We're gonna walk over to the brown Swiss here. I'm not much of an animal shooter, but we're gonna go for it. Okay, so here we are now back once again at Shelburne Farms with the brown Swiss cows that I love their cheese. Exposure here, once again, light hasn't changed. It's still f11 at either a 1/25th or a 2/50th. I'm looking at compositionally. I love this one cow who's staring at me, and I'm gonna try to see if I can get her face in one edge and then have it sort of sweep across. All right, one important thing to remember too, that if you're ever out in the country like this photographing, A, stay away from electric fences, and B, be sure to respect other people's land. Don't just go walking on land without getting permission. All right, so here's another photograph that I love here at Shelburne Farms. This particular one, I'm really a photographer who likes to photograph at the edges of transitions. I love the transition from one street to another, the transition from shadow to highlight, or the transition from the edge of a forest to a field. Now, in a shot like this, you could meter it a couple different ways. If you really cared about these deep shadows in here, you would, have to be careful because the contrast between those shadows and the highlights are going to be so high. This is a shot where I might try the 20-stop dynamic range technique with PMK Developer. Basically what you do is you overexpose the film by 3 stops. So you would expose a 400 speed film at 200, 150, and then you would cut the development time in half. I guarantee on a shot like this of Tri-X, it would give me everything here and everything out here. But that's not so much what I'm going for. I'm more interested in crushing these blacks a little bit. I kind of like them more as sculpture in the scene and not so much as a tree. I want them to be like these really dark sort of vertical forces. So I'm going to shoot this at a 1/25th at f8, knowing intentionally that I'm going to be dropping those shadows. But I think that'll be a good compromise between highlight and shadow with the developer. And I'm really liking how this one tree right here, the small one, cradles between the other big ones. And with the field of view of the Widelux, it should be kind of nice. I got to get a little closer in though. I'm also using the trees to block objects that I don't like in the frame. Like right about here. So I could have the cows, and I don't want that. Right about here. All right, so that should be perfect. Once again, the latitude range of Tri-X is pretty huge, so I'm gonna have a lot of forgiveness. I probably will have some detail in the shadows, and in post-rationalization, I'll decide if I want to keep it or not. But for right now, I'm kind of feeling it's more just these black lines, these very sort of sculptured, almost like a heavy ink drawing, being cut against that bright background. All right, so I have to just say right now, I do not get any compensation from Shelburne Farms. I don't want you to think that this is some sort of advertisement for Shelburne Farms. But one of my favorite things about photographing here is that you can actually stay here. This is the family's former home, and it now is an inn. Unfortunately, this year they made the decision to be closed for COVID, but the surroundings and the landscape in the farm are amazing. And Lake Champlain is right there. The view across Lake Champlain to the high peaks is pretty much second to none. It's just amazing. Hello, so I'm at the Burlington airport right now waiting for Eve's flight to get in. I had a few extra minutes and I thought I'd share a few thoughts. First off, there's a belief amongst a lot of photographers that you have to go to some exotic remote place to make good work. The reality is you make good work no matter where you're at. If you can't make good work where you live, you're not going to make good work when you go somewhere else. You have to find that inspiration. You have to be looking constantly. And that's super important. So don't feel that, oh, if I could only go to Arizona, or if I could only go to Antarctica, if I could only go to Sri Lanka, my work would be better. It's not true. You know, good work is good work no matter where you live. Additionally, I find that for myself, I make some of the absolute best work that I do within 10 minutes of my house. Honest to God, some of the best pieces I ever make are right where I live. And it's because I see them again and again and again. I really start to know the location. I can anticipate light. And I try to allow myself to be inspired by the everyday surroundings of where I live. Having said that, though, there are certain places that I do like to visit and like to visit them often, a couple times a year. Obviously, it's been difficult this year with the pandemic, but places like Cape Cod. I love the light in Cape Cod. Shelburne Farms, where I was today, what place that I visit probably 3-4 times a year. The Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. These are places that I can get to within a couple of hours, so it's not like I have to pack and get on airplanes and stuff like that. And I can go and I can visit again and again. And I've been doing this sort of ritual for the last 24 years. Since we moved to Vermont. And what I've found is that I know when I like to go, what I'm looking for, and it's very sort of creative. So find the places that you love and visit them obsessively. But remember, a place is a place. Good work is good work. Good work is good work no matter where you are. So don't think that you have to go to someplace exotic, someplace remote to make good work, because you don't. All right, good morning. So here we are in the studio. I've decided to process the roll of film we shot yesterday, the test sort of exposure roll. In my Jovo CPP, I'm using DDX Developer by Ilford, 1:4. DDX is kind of like a liquid version of Xtal. It's very similar, slightly different properties, but I find the convenience of a liquid developer for today's purposes just perfect. So once I do a pre-wet, which will be for about 2 minutes, I'm going to then dump the developer in. It'll sit in for exactly 8 minutes, and then we'll work through the process. So let's get at it. Okay, now that everything has been processed, we've reclaimed or recycled all the chemicals throughout the entire processing sequence. I'm just going to add a little bit of wetting agent to the film, hang it to dry, take a look at how the negatives look, figure out what we like the best, and then we'll move into scanning. Stay tuned. Yeah, this looks really good. This is the house. I'm looking at the 2 different versions. It's just like what I said in the initial video. The one that has the additional exposure has a little better shadows. The one that doesn't, they're just a little thinner, but they're both definitely usable. The tree turned out really nice, the way it bowed on the horizon. The portrait turned out great. Get a stronger loop here. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's really good. Looking at that, that worked out just fine. I like that too. So I thought I would take a minute here and talk about the exposures of these negatives and what I see comparing, a traditional method of exposing compared to the alternative exposure technique that I talked about, sort of loosely based on William Mortensen. And in total honesty, I have to admit, I didn't really do the Mortensen technique. So if all of you were sort of thinking that already, you'd be correct, because I did not do a minimal agitation, highly dilute developer. I did DDX 1:4. So that's on me. However, looking at the negatives, I will say that both of them are very printable. I do think in hindsight, they all would have benefited tremendously from a minimal agitation technique, something like, a Rodinal, highly dilute, or some sort of highly dilute developer, or even DDX 1 to 9 may have been even a slightly better choice. I'm not unhappy with the densities. Everything scanned really easily on my Imicon scanner. And I also did a couple of quick little test looks on a V750, and they looked really great as well. But overall, the exposures and my basic guesses were spot on. I'm really impressed with the final image in the group, which was the edge of the forest, where you're looking through these dark trees and looking out to the highlights. There is a surprising amount of detail in those trees, and there is a surprising amount of really well-controlled highlights within that piece, and I think that speaks to the power of the film latitude of Tri-X and the really nice combination that Tri-X and DDX are, much like Tri-X and X-TAW would be, and much like Tri-X and D76 are. It's just a really malleable film. So overall, I'm really happy with this. What I will do in the future here is I will do a post where I truly show you a side-by-side between Mortensen's version and a hybrid version of Mortensen compared to a non-Mortensen technique, because I think that I've talked about it and I should do it. So anyways, let's move on. I'll do some conclusion thoughts here as we look at the final scans. All right, so conclusion. First off, I think that I confirmed, every time I shoot 35 millimeter, I confirm what I already know. I'm really more of a 120 shooter. I like big negatives. I like 120 size film. I like, 617, 6x7. Yes, I know the Widelux is bigger, but I'm sort of a 120 junkie, and I admit it. But let's look at the film. So the very first image here of the house that I talked about, it has a really wonderful expressive quality. Yes, it's a picture of a house on a hill, but I really like the tonality. I like the contrast. It has very much that sort of cinema sort of quality that I like that the panning lens on the Widelux sort of gives. The shadows are, I think, well controlled. There's a right amount of detail for me. I'm not one of these people that love sort of the HDR look that so many people are into. Even in film, people that are into this just endless tonal range. I think there should be a shadow and there should be a highlight, and there's this balance between shadow detail and highlight detail, and I think this image really has it. It's a sharp image. It's a sharp image for a Widelux. A Widelux is a fixed focused lens. It's focused basically to 10 feet, so everything else is being covered by depth of field. And I looked at the film at the negatives under a high powered loupe, and yeah, it feels right to me for that type of lens. But overall, I feel that the expressive quality, the dynamic range, the grain, everything is well controlled in this image. Let's move on to the next one. So this is very much, I'm hoping this shows well on the screen that you're looking at it on. I like the feeling of this image a lot. It has this wonderful glow. The tree expresses itself exactly how I had wanted to. You can notice how there's this little valley that the tree sort of fits within. That, once again, is exploiting the panning lens on the Widelux. The sky, to me, is really beautiful. It's this beautiful shade of like gray going up. It's not white. I'm hoping you see that. It has beautiful gray tonality in it. Very much the way that I, generally speaking, like to have my skies reproduce. I'm not one of these people that like black skies. I don't use a 25 red filter ever. It's just not my visual aesthetics. So I like the way this feels overall. There's enough shadow detail on the sides. The clarity's there. Once again, I think it really speaks, once again, volumes to the film developer combination and exploiting what the Widelux lens could do. Here you see a really great example of using a piece of equipment for what the piece of equipment does. This is one of my pet peeves, the reason to own lots of different cameras is that different cameras bring different qualities. And, in this particular camera with the Widelux, or if I'm using my Noble X 150, I like to exploit that curved film plane and what it does. Otherwise, what's the point of using a curved film plane? So use the camera for what the camera can do. And if cameras have unique properties, consider using those properties. Let's move on to the next image, which is the portrait of Jacques. I like this portrait as much as I do portraits. I think this sort of captures sort of the moment. Compositionally, I think it's fine. I like the way the flowers on the left-hand side of the frame came up. The tonality is really nice. You know, he's in harsh middle of the afternoon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon sun. But I think it feels good. It's got a nice presence to him. And it sort of shows him in the landscape. So there's nothing about that I don't really love. The next image, let's move on, of the fence. Once again, this is another image where you really see what I was talking about with using and exploiting what the camera can do. The Widelux is unique. So by allowing that hillside to do something that visually it doesn't do in reality, you know, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not presenting reality in my pieces because photography really doesn't have anything to do with reality anyways. It's all an additive process. So I like exploiting this sort of cross line and exploiting the hillside. And I think it works really well. So these are all, to me, good sample test images. I mean, I'm not going to, you know, make any bank on any of these images, but it's a nice sample test image showing what the camera and film can do. And let's move on to our cow image. So once again, as I mentioned, I'm not a big wildlife, wild animal, even, you know, farm animal shooter, but here we go. And I think it feels right. Once again, the panning lens gives it a really great feeling. There's a curvature to the film, to the horizon line. You know, there's a really great looming sense of the cow coming out at you. The tonality is really nice. It's got nice pop, you know, nice contrast, pretty decent clarity. I mean, the panning lens is moving, the cows were moving, but for the most part, everything came in sharp enough, at least for my eye. And let's now move on to the final image. As I mentioned before, this one I'm actually kind of impressed with, that just impressed in terms of what the film and developer could do. It's an okay image, but what I like, and I did push down the blacks here, I crushed the blacks more than they actually are. There is a fair amount of detail in these blacks. I didn't want too much. I don't want your eye fighting between the beautiful highlight tones and then the shadow tones. I wanted there to be an ability for your eye to go through those dark tones to the light. And I knew the lens would flare a little bit. The Widelux lens, as I mentioned in the video, does like to flare. And because I'm shooting out to this really bright light, there's a fair amount of flare where that light is really dominant around those 3 central trees. And personally, I love that. That's very much my visual aesthetic. If I can have flare in a frame, I want flare in a frame. I really love flare. So overall, I'm really happy with this experiment, with this you know, this test of going out and doing these shots on location at Shelburne Farms. I hope you found this to be helpful. If you have questions or comments, please, you know, post it. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please subscribe to the channel. Please tell your friends to subscribe to the channel. And as I mentioned, I will do that side-by-side of a Mortensen minimal agitation technique, comparing to a traditional technique sometime here in the near future. I'm planning on doing more of these type of day trips. So if you liked it, please say, I loved it, I liked it. And if you have places you'd like to have me go, let me know. If I somewhere within my couple hours range, I'll try to go somewhere and give you my impressions of that place. So thank you very much for listening. Have a great day and go shoot some film.